Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Perspective. I'm very excited to introduce our guest on the show today, who is a colleague that goes way back in the early days of community radio here in South Africa. That's when we got together and started producing, promoting and presenting shows way back, and it was called The Voice radio station. My colleague from so very long ago is none other than Adley Jacobs. He is a storyteller, broadcaster and communications specialist. And of course, today we're going to talk about his latest work, which traces ancestral journeys, sacred pilgrimage, and the names that were never meant to be forgotten. And we're going to be honing in on one of those names, and that of course is Haji Hassanuddin. Believe it or not, Alhamdulillah, the first Muslim from the Western Cape who performed the sacred pilgrimage way back in the 1830s. And even more amazing is that our guest today, Adley Jacobs, is the great-great-great-great-grandson of Haji Hassanuddin. We're going to talk about the homecoming of the Hujaj and so much more regarding Cape culture and traditions. So do stay with us. Let's greet our guest, welcome him very warmly, and let's get this conversation on the road. Assalamu alaikum to you, dear Adley Jacobs. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam, Julie Adam. So good to see you.
It's been years and years and years, and lovely connecting up with you. So let's get to the heart of the matter. We're talking culture and traditions, and I also alluded to the fact that Haji Hassanuddin, who is your great-great-great-great-grandfather, alhamdulillah, was the first South African to have performed Hajj. And I think it is so amazing and timeless that we bring up his name in this conversation today, because we are now going to be welcoming with open arms the homecoming of the Hujaj 2025.
Shukran, sir, for interviewing me on this issue and focused on, obviously, Haji Hassanuddin, in other words, Karel Pilgrim. Now, you know, in terms of my own Hajj, you know, when people return from Hajj, I remember when I was a child, you know, we used to be at the port, you know, and people would come from the ship, you know, and there'd be streamers, you know, when people come, the Hujaj, and they come with a surban on, you know, and the women, they had the medoras on, you know, but the important part of it, the arrival is a celebration in itself, but the most important part is sharing the stories, the experience, the inspiration of Hajj. People sit at their homes, you know, obviously with food, with dates that they brought, you know, and sweet things and so on. But that's not the important part. The significant part is that people then tell the story as to how they went for that Hajj, how they left the Kaaba and going to Mina and then to Arafah, you know, and that was the most important part, because it's either it's a lot of heat there, but it's about the connection to the divine. You know, the type of du'as that you make for your family, for your children, you know, for your parents, for your friends, and then going all the way back to the Kaaba, you know, and the stoning. It's about listening and to people telling us those stories, inspiring us on that process, not just to listen it, what the stories happened and the experience of it, but it's about, am I ready for me, you know, to make my intention, my niyya, to go for Hajj. That's the important part. I mean, in Cape Town, before you go, you actually go and greet people and then ask them, please forgive me, face to face. But of course, a lot of those things get lost today when people aren't able or they may be now in Joburg now, or whatever the case may be. So now you'll have to go through Zoom, or they have to go on phone, or send a message. But I would think, in fact, my experience of Cape Town is now, as people are arriving now from Hajj, people are getting themselves ready for this, to come and sit down at least a 20, 30 minutes of listening their stories, even if they have to retell the stories over and over and over. But that, I think, it's almost a dhikr.
So Adli, I think the beauty about meeting the Hujjaj when they return home from a journey of a lifetime, two things happen. If you have already had the experience of Hajj, and whilst they relay their story, it allows you to relive your Hajj experience all over again. Alhamdulillah, what a beautiful way of taking you back in time to a very momentous time in your life, a very spiritual time in your life, and just to rekindle that spirituality within yourself, and for you to start reflecting again. I went 5 years ago, I am here now, what have I achieved in my homecoming, what should I be doing differently? That's for those people already who've been fortunate enough to have performed the Hajj. And then the retelling of the stories for people who haven't been ignites the fire within them to want to do everything in their power to make their Hajj a possibility.
Precisely. There are, of course, Muslims that often forget the moment. They, of course, focus on getting gifts ready. They go for the souk, to get good scarves or good kufiya, to give those gifts. But that's beautiful. Showing gifts is important. To bring people, for example, a Quran that was in the haram, would be beautiful. But as you said, the focus is the story. The focus is the experience. And often, sometimes, I had a friend who came from Hajj, and he said to me, I can't, my feeling, I don't know. Was it significant enough? I said to him, don't think about other people's experiences. Focus on yours. Focus on the connection that you had, the insight that you had, the things that you made dua for Allah. You opened yourself up to that. You were sitting under that sun, because you didn't even have your kufiya on. You had your ihram on, and you're lifting up your hands for Allah Most High. And focus and tell me, what were those du'as that you made? And that is where the focus is.
Okay.
And then share that to others.
All right. Names that were never meant to be forgotten. And that, of course, brings us to Haji Hassanuddin, your great-great-great-grandfather. He performed Hajj in the 1830s. But before you respond to that, let's go for a break. We'll come back and you can share that very beautiful story with us, how your family happened to come upon those archives and what it means to you as a family, knowing that your ancestor was the first Muslim from South Africa, the Western Cape particularly, to have performed his Hajj in the 1830s. All of that and much, much more when we get back with Adley Jacobs, a storyteller, broadcaster and communications specialist. And he says he works between memory, resistance and the sacred. So please do continue watching this amazing story. Welcome back. My guest is Adley Jacobs. I did indicate earlier on that he is a broadcaster and communication specialist, but what I didn't tell you is that he's also the author of a book called Punching Above Its Weight. And inshallah, in the near future, we will talk to him about that particular book. It's about activism, it's about freedom, it's about our struggle here in South Africa. But for today, we're going to be talking about traditions, the Cape Malay culture and traditions. Adley, welcome back, and the story of your ancestor and his first Hajj, or the first man, Muslim man, having performed Hajj in the early 1830s.
Very good question, Julie, and that's quite important and quite significant. The fact that so much has been lost. Many people are in fact don't even know where they can begin of their story of their ancestors. People don't even know in terms of the connection to their surnames and where they come from, because all of those things about those who have been enslaved, that there are so many things lost in terms of how they were renamed when they arrived on the ship, you know, and then put into slavery, and then named because of the month, January or February, you know, or owned of those people who enslaved them and owned them, and so the name Barents would become Barents, you know, owned by Barents, you know, and so on. So it's significant, yeah, or important to go and find where do we come from, to find the history of it. But it talks about finding the stories. There must be some stories, oral stories captured, you know, in their history. But the significance is, and in my instance, I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate that I found someone who found the Ottoman connection, because there was a surname Effendi, you know, and they wanted to know, how did this man be an Effendi? And it was connected to my ancestors. My Hassanuddin's son, he changed his surname to Effendi because he became the headmaster of the school in the Cape. It was an Ottoman school. And now the significant part of this is not just about retelling the story, but it's about capturing it, writing down those stories. And that's what I've been doing. That's why I put it in a blog, and I'm researching more, because I'm thinking that there's a possibility to write a book on this. Where did Karel come from? His mom, Paka, Jan Paka. Where is his daughter connected to me? What happened to her? Is there any history of that? And so down the line to our family. It's significant not just for us, for me, for my family, but also for our community, for for this country, and bigger than that, you know, for the world. Finding the whole issue of slavery, and finding the hooks of it, and finding the stories of it, you know, and to break down the myth and the mythology around it, and finding the story, and then so we can celebrate, you know, and share to each other, you know, and build a more a better community, a better world, you know, a better country. For me, I think it's a significant part of it.
Okay, we will be moving along with more questions around heritage, culture, and do we uphold this slavery, or the slave names that we were given? Do we hold on to those? Do we go back and trace our roots, find out who we really are, where we come from, and then take on that new identity of ours? Well, all of that and more in our next segment right here on Perspective with Adli Jacobs. Welcome back. This is Perspective. My guest is Adli Jacobs. We're talking about Cape Malay culture and heritage. Adli, regarding this time of the slave trade and our forefathers who were forced to take on the names of their masters, do you believe that in this day and age we should still be holding on to that legacy, or do we go out and truly find our identities where we've come from and take on those new roles? Or do you think that those slave names and our part, our forefathers who were enslaved, is that something we should uphold as well? With pride, saying that this is what our forefathers sacrificed for us so that we are now enjoying a better life here in South Africa and globally, of course.
That's a good question. There are different views on this issue. Some have started to change their surnames because it held part of the surnames of the masters and not of their parents. In fact, their names and surnames got lost, got erased, and then renamed from these masters. So at one level, there are those that they'd like to change, but those are few people. Most other people have in fact held onto their surnames because they don't want to get it. They don't want it to get lost and to get themselves lost with connected friends, and with the history of it all, and then rather taking the surname, but finding the story, finding the history of it, the significance of it. And that has been happening to a lot of people in community, and I can understand why people would hold on to their surnames. I mean, like I've been considering my own surname, but my surname, we don't know yet what that surname came from. My ancestor Khatia, Oma Khati, she got married to Abdul Jacobs, and who is he? And that is another story that I must have to research and find this. But yes, I think that the issue is that it caused a challenge for some. Others don't regard it as an issue because for some people, they're also not too interested in really finding their history and finding their ancestors. But that is what showing and celebrating and printing and putting it in articles or academically is to share that to others so that people can understand the significance of it, how it could fall into our community, into our family, and give us a part of where it is that we're going, but building on where we come from.
Absolutely.
That's the important part.
I think it is about identities, and I do believe that it's important that we document all of this so at least we have a legacy to pass on to future generations. But that being said, you recently had an engagement with your brother-in-law, and you spoke about promoting the sorban again, that sacred cloth of knowledge and dignity that once crowned the heads of teachers and storytellers is now being passed down to the younger generation, very especially for the young boys after perhaps 2 years of learning to recite the Quran. Is that great moment in their lives when they don the sorban, and the girlies would then don the medora and walk to the company gardens. How did that all start, and how important and significant is that tradition?
I was fortunate. My brother-in-law, Alamin, he came to visit with my sister, Fatima, and I was telling him that I'm quite I like this idea of the sorban. It's got a history. It used to be worn for people who came for Hajj. And when they came from the plane or from the ship, they put on their sorban, and they wore it. I'm a Haji, and that would celebrate it and and but I had in fact I'd spoken to Sheikh Jamil here in Joburg, Sheikh Jamil Abrams, and he gave me some very interesting insight of this. He calls this the khirqat at-tahkim, a mantle of responsibility, not just fabric. It's not just a turban with a cap on top of it, very colorful with different colors, but it means that it was used when people completed the Quran, not in terms of as memorizing, but reciting, reciting the entire Quran, the tamat that they call the tamat, and they wore a sorban. The kid, as the youngsters, they would go down, to the gardens, in the Cape. And the fortunate part for me that I was 9 years old, and my mother took me to this Khalifa, this Muallim, older man, and I looked at him when we walked back. My mother says, "So what do you think?" And I said, "I like to saw wolf." His eyes, was clear, and of course the grey beard, and he didn't smile too much at the time. But this man, Junain, Allah means dad. He taught me Quran. Listening not just for the Quran, he also listened to the stories, the awliya. So there was an important connection. The one is the sorban, but also the midawra, that women, it's not just a scarf, it's a dress, it's in tradition to cover the head and to honor the heart. That's what these connections are. It's the people wear the midawra when they rampi snay, in salawat, when it's time for celebrating, reciting on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it's time for his birthday, and they cut, these letters, these rampis cut into 3 leaves, into pieces of material. And then in the masjid, they would share it to others, when they came to recite salawat, So it's about tradition, Some parts of it has been dying, but now people are thinking about this, and that's why I'm sharing this, in a blog, on social media,
Okay.
So that people can see it.
Let's talk about, we spoke about the slaves earlier on, and I think something else that ties in directly with the slaves, and I'm hoping that it's an ongoing tradition in the Western Cape, is the Ghadat, which was traditionally read in a congregation on a Thursday night. What's the story behind the Ghadat?
Imam al-Haddad, who comes from Tarim in Yemen, he was a Sayyid, connected to the Prophet as a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Haddad, in fact, he was his nickname. It got to do with blacksmith. Now, he wrote down the Ratibul Haddad Ratib means to put it together, all of these recitals. And this was, I think, a 1700s time. And then it was descended, it was sent, it was shared in the beginning. It was recited in Mecca and Medina, in the Haram, every Thursday evening, right? But in fact, for many in that period in Makkah and Medina, they would do it every night, between Maghrib and Isha, because it was written to protect, and then to remember, and it's worked in with Al-Fatiha, the Hadad, the Huk, the three calls, and all of these things written in there in salawat, and in dhikr. And then to remember this, so people would go, when someone would to die, they would remember parts of the Ratib al-Hadad and they would recite it. In fact, when some of them were slaves, they would recite the Ratib al-Hadad, and it gave them protection. They would put off the lights. Today, or after that slavery, they celebrated it because it gave them protection, and they made food, and they made kusistas, and so that becomes sweet. It's like the rampisnei. It's about the smell, So you smell something beautiful, you taste something beautiful, so that you connect with what you recite, that then comes right inside of you, and then share with others.
Okay.
So that's the beauty of it.
Beautifully said. One more break to go, and then we're going to wrap up with our final segment. Please do stay with us. Welcome back. We are into the final segment of Perspective this morning with Brother Adley Jacobs from the Western Cape. We're going to wrap up by talking about something very iconic in the Western Cape, on the pavements in the city of Cape Town. And that, of course, is the flower seller. And we're going to pay tribute by way of this program to Hatta, the flower seller. Adley, that's a beautiful story, is it not? And the tribute to Hatta speaks not only to Hatta, but to all flower sellers throughout time and in future as well.
Oh man, I was watching. I was on Facebook, and I came across on Facebook. I found this particular, you could call it a meme, and it's about the death of Cecilia Williams, also known as Hatta. And I didn't know Hatta really, and I'd never been down to Cape Town in the last while, so I'd never met a Hatta. But I remembered that when I was a child, one of my cousins took me down, at the street, and there is Trafalgar Place, where these flowers are being sold, and there are these women that are there, and they've got wonderful spirit, and engaging, and if you've got a terrible problem and so on, they say, come, let me show you what flowers we can give you. It shouldn't just be roses, it should also be others, and so on. And this is part of a tradition almost in the Cape. This has been going on for not just decades, it's just probably been sold by these sellers, maybe 1800s or maybe earlier than that. Who knows? The point is, when she died, I thought this would just get lost, So I did a not just a meme on it on Facebook. I did a little story of it in my blog, and I regarded her one of the saints of the everyday, hawkers, kids that are on the street. People just see them as nothing. They don't exist, So you just take out your money and then you walk off, instead of sitting and looking at this, what I call the fragrance lingers or should linger, you know, the upper class often gets lost, you know. So
And
next
Atle, let
time
me
when you
come in
go there,
here. Let me come in here. She was a mere flower seller, as are hundreds of other flower sellers over time in the Western Cape. But they are real people. They have stories to tell. And from those very humble beginnings as flower sellers, undoubtedly they have raised very many educated people, young people who are probably now running the economy in the Western Cape and have done wonderful, have carved out beautiful lives for themselves going forward. So let's celebrate them and continue celebrating these little people who make a huge impact on our lives.
exactly. I agree with what precisely of that, celebrating the underclass, the hawkers, children on the street, make it part of your life. You know what the wonderful thing that I was selling. I was also showing some other memes around it. That when you at the robot, you know, in fact, we often get lost. We're on our way now. Maybe we're waiting to pick up our kids. So we're frustrated, and there is someone selling flowers. Bringing you joy, bringing you something entirely beautiful. Finding the beauty, but seeing that within people. You know, greeting them. Finding out what their names are. And sometimes give some time to listen to the story, and then remember it and then share it to others. That
Okay.
is what the color is.
Adli, I know you two have to go, and we've got about 5 minutes left on the interview. Let's wrap up by talking about the kramats, the significance and how it has become an international tourist visiting site in the Western Cape.
Yeah, the circle of Kramats, circle of saints that runs all around the Cape. That what people have believed was protecting us from all these awliya that are buried there. One in Robben Island, whether it's Signal Hill, whether it's Constantia, whether it's almost in Worcester. These are all the places that it's around. Go and read a book of Shafiq Morton. He wrote From the Spice Islands of Cape Town. Go and read Dr. Ahmad David's the Mosques of Bukap. This is our tradition, our history, power of and we need to find these stories too. Again, do not let it get lost. Do not forget. Do not let this history gets erased. Go and read up on it. Share that to your kids. And share that to your family, and then celebrate it. That's what we need to do. That's the important part of those those kramats. Karama, it means dignity and respect. Also connected to karim, meaning generous, honorable, gracious. That's what it is. This kramats or mazars, the holy shrines, of Islam, they mark the graves of holy people, of the Muslim faith who have died. Some of them during slavery, and some that we don't even know. Some that got lost. Tuang Yusuf, Tuang Said, Tuang Guru. These are wonderful, wonderful things to celebrate. There's one on Robben Island, the Prince of Madura. Sayyid Abdurrahman Maturu, one of Cape Town's first imams, was exiled to the island in the 1740s and died there in 1754. So do not let us forget this. Hold on to it. This is part of our legacy.
Okay, what's your message to all the youth now in Youth Month? Youth Day is around the corner, but very specifically for Youth Month, what's your message to the young people of South Africa?
Hold on to your community. Hold on to your family, but think about where you're going. Think about the past, think about where you are right now, you know, and think how you can lift yourself up and looking yourself into a future, into a better future. You know, this is the most important part for you, you know, and think of all the things that can help build you, you know. Find what's in your Islam, you know. Find in your community. Find in the celebratory people, you know, and then celebrate them, connect with them, you know, and don't let go. We can build a better country, and you are part of that future.
Some of them may complain that they're unemployed. How can they go on to build a better future with the huge unemployment rate in our country? And we need to have these conversations, particularly now in Youth Month. What do you say to that?
No, that is definitely a challenge. But you know, don't have a chip on your shoulder. Don't have a big problem. Don't have an issue of saying it is. So people get focused on, say, for example, the government. Find your own. Find your opportunities, and then connect with some of that. The point is, the rest of the community, we need to help our community. We need to help our youth. Some of us must be mentors, you know, and find the opportunities. You know, it must all things are connected. You know, nothing is disconnected. That's the important part. So yes, there are challenges, but we can find a way around this, and we can help people that have their own challenges, whether it's whatever, whether it's drugs or whatever. You know, we need to educate people, and we must start reading. Find your books, you know, and find the opportunities inside of it. You know, of course, some people would like when they use their cell phones in order to do that. We understand, but also actually read books, real books. You know, there's so much to see.
Adley Jacobs, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you indeed for showing us the beauty, the rich beauty and history of Cape Malay culture and traditions. Fascinating, and let's hold on to it, and let's be proud of who we are. And of course, a strong message and support to the youth of our country. Let's not just wait for government to do it for us. Let us as communities band together and help the government to obviously make sure that services are delivered. Simple thing, in our own communities, let's fix our potholes. That's a start. But thank you once again. Thank you, and continue writing those blogs and memes and whatever else you do, because you do enrich our lives. Keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Khair. Walaikum salam.
And that's it on Perspective for today. Till the next time, as always, be safe, stay warm. Assalamu alaikum. And Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.